Welcome back. Now, while many federal MPs were relaxing or more likely plotting over the summer break, federal Labor MP Husic was visiting the US from Wall Street to Silicon Valley to get a feel for the new tech world and lessons we can learn. He's already caused some consternation with an article claiming venture capital will be dead in Australia within 5 years, and he wants to stop the brain drain. He joins me now from Canberra. Welcome back to the show.
Good evening. How are you?
In that lovely American term, what was your best takeout from your extensive study tour of America?
A number of things. I spent a bit of time, as you were indicating in the intro, over in the US and in particular in the West Coast and around Silicon Valley. I think one of the pitfalls for politicians is they go over there and think that they can replicate Silicon Valley back in Australia, and I don't think that is what we should be doing. We should be working out what works for them, and I guess the big takeout in Silicon Valley is that they've got a geographic concentration of talent and skill, which is backed up by a free flow of capital. And for us, on those two fronts, we've got a lot of work to do, and it's really now applying the policy development process to that to see what we can do to get more talent and to ensure that it's backed up by an adequate reserve of capital.
They also have two other unique things as a woman who had a fellowship to Stanford University, and that is Stanford, which is what Silicon Valley grew out of, which is quite special. They also have a lot of money in America, which our tech companies are finding when they want to raise money, which brings me to this article you wrote a couple of weeks ago. You quoted a US VC saying basically VC in Australia, venture capital, could dry up in 5 years. Given there's so little of it now, this has caused all kinds of hand-wringing here with people debating the point.
And I think the stats are worth looking at. If you take a snapshot, I saw some figures recently between a 10-year period between 2002 and 12, the stats are that about 6.5 billion was the Australian VC spend versus it's 280 billion in the US, so it's a massive difference.
See, I wouldn't have thought we'd even get to 6 billion. I think that's highly respectable given the whinging you hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is good, but it also, when you compare it to others, you know, there is a big contrast. And when this US VC raised this with me, well, I thought it was obviously a very stark comment, and then I started putting it in particular to Australians that are working in Silicon Valley. And there was no pushback to the figure. There was no patriotic surge to stand up for Australia and say, no, that's ridiculous.
But why?
And
just
so
explain why
that
they
back
said.
Here, and it seemed to get.
Before we get the reaction, just explain why they think it will dry up.
Part of the reason, there's a whole host of factors, so it's never easy to just say cut and dry, this is the big reason. But one of the things that got pointed out is that the returns that we get don't replenish the pool enough, that there's not enough risk-taking on some of the big projects or some of the things that could lend themselves to something bigger and better, and that that gets contested here. You know, local VCs will say to you, well, look, there's a lot of money for good ideas, and startups have said that as well, but if they're not taking a chance, then you can't really get the returns that pay for those investments.
Well, of course, it's also a different culture. The fact is that it's like mining, it's like anything. It is a risky proposition, and you are going to lose money, and you invest a lot to get that huge payday. The culture in the US is more about the risk reward. They don't mind it, whereas here, people are, as we're seeing with major corporations every day, we're becoming a very risk-adverse country in an investment point of view, aren't we?
And it is something that Glenn Stevens and the RBA have commented on. I sit, as you may be aware, as the Deputy Chair of the House of Reps Economics Committee, and when we've had the RBA appear before us, they have been literally raising this point. When they refer to animal spirits and they refer to entrepreneurialism and they refer to a greater appetite that's needed to take on greater risk for greater reward, this is obviously something that's concerning them greatly. And so you know, when you have them saying that, and then you've got US VCs pointing to it, and some of the things that they have pointed to, for example, is that they're concerned, and this is something that's been highlighted by US VCs, in terms of our directors' liabilities here, quite often directors will bail from companies when they think that there might be a prospect of failure, which is understandable because of the way that things are structured here. But at a time where their expertise could actually be focused in finding out how to save companies, they're gone. And in the US, picking up on something you just mentioned then, Janine, and the difference in culture, they had this view about failing fast, and that is not failing for the sake of failing, but if you're going to fail, learn from it, dust yourself off and go after the next venture where you can actually apply those lessons learned and succeed.
I had a US chairman of an Australian biotech last week. They are quite happy. A lot of US people are coming out, they're chairing it, they're on boards, they're running it, they're bringing the money with them. But he pointed out that, you know, that's just the way it is. I mean, it's no big problem. The money's there. It's just, you know, it doesn't matter if the money's not here, if they can get it from overseas.
Yeah, and I think, look, if I can stress, and I've said this to local VCs, please don't shoot the messenger. I'm relating a view that's been expressed to me from one side of the Pacific. I think we do need to talk about this. We do need to see what money can be available through VCs or other mechanisms for startups that are hungry for the capital at the stage of development that they're at. And you know, if we're not having this conversation, you know,
you're not going to get
we sort of do hold back the potential. Well, and we do hold the potential hold back the potential for growth.
The other thing they pointed out,
well, I was just going to make the point very quickly. In a globalised, particularly with this sector that's very global in its outlook, you know, do you rely on local capital to support growth, or do you accept that you've got local talent that can draw on overseas money to succeed? And I think that's something worth exploring too.
Well, yes, except that you also wrote an article saying Silicon Valley, give us our talent back. How can you have both? If we want to get the money, the talent will move to where the money is, Ed. So you kind of want it both ways, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I often heard the remark that you know, the US was very impressed with our local Aussie startups because they don't just think local, they're thinking global. They want to scale up to a global level really quickly. So there is an appetite to invest in local firms. But if we want that to continue, we can't, you know, we cannot tolerate a situation where we're training less people in IT than what we did 10 years ago. And the ones that we do have, you know, they get attracted to other innovation hotspots in the world, not just the US, but Israel's doing a lot of work. Singapore is really focused on this now. New Zealand is also getting involved. If we have our talent leave the country, leave our shores, then that is a longer-term problem for us if we expect to see innovation driving economic activity. So,
but the
as
good
a nation,
news,
we've got to get real on this.
But the good news from the American I spoke to last week was that the biotech market, for example, is really hot in the US. A lot of people making a lot of money. It's booming. And he just felt that we were 5, maybe a bit more years behind because we've had a few failures. It's knocked the industry around, but there's a lag and we could get there.
And, you know, again, this is not to say that things will come to a screaming halt in 5 years' time, but we do, as a country, need, on both sides of politics, this is not a partisan view, but we need both sides of politics focused on this.
Okay, so what are you recommending
and
then?
Working together.
So what are you recommending for your lot, and what are you going to do that's bipartisan that you can do with them?
Well, I'm very keen. I think we should be working together on both sides of the aisle to champion and advocate on behalf of the sector. The sector, like, what I'm really impressed with by the sector is the sector's not, you know, coming forward and saying we need, you know, we need all these tax concessions, we need a sack of cash chucked at us through grants.
That's good because we don't have any.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is absolutely a very live debate. But where they say we can make a difference is deal with the skill shortage and get rid of regulatory roadblocks. And we do need to work on that front. So, you know, it is promising to see. I've certainly been very active, and the opposition has been looking at ways to promote, for example, a platform of crowdsource equity funding. And I spoke with a number of, well, some US players that are very, very active in this space, and we've released a position paper outlining what our view is on this. We're very keen for the government to move ahead with legislation and work with them when they eventually bring it to the Parliament. What
about a key complaint on all sides, and I notice it's been raised in some committees this week? We have a giant pool of superannuation fund money. It's been a constant complaint when you talk about risk adverse that they'd be happier to invest overseas. I noticed the super funds fighting back, saying it's the biotech's fault. They're not selling well, they're not up to it. What about the super pool?
Well, again, this is something that, and I had Aussie startups and I had entrepreneurs, Australian sourced, working in the States, saying why can't we even find a slither of the national savings pool and be able to direct it to early stage innovation. And I obviously explained to them that the super funds are very focused on providing returns to fund members, but if you hear stories that Aussie super funds are investing in US VCs and they're not doing the same in Australia, I think questions should be raised. And I do think that we need to find a way to be able to balance out the mandate that they have to local fund members, and we do need to make sure that the quality of the investment propositions are strong so that Aussie super funds can invest. But we do need to focus more and more. We need people talking about this. We need, the jobs that are here now are under threat by technology. We shouldn't see it as a negative. We should prepare for it. We should get ready for the people and the jobs of the future. But we're not going to do it if we just sit on our hands and wait for someone else to do it and see what happens overseas. We should be grabbing this by both hands right now.
We should, and more politicians like you going, and I'll give credit to the Australian-American Leadership Dialogue, which does a West Coast, Silicon Valley one, which tries to push this and tries to get politicians from both sides and business people and media. We were both, I know that was part of your trip, and they're doing their bit, and we both obviously found it valuable. I can't let you go without asking about Canberra. I'm not going to ask you who's going to be Prime Minister next week or what the other lot are doing. Could you just explain why your lot went down in the polls? Because everybody's incredulous after the shocker of a week this lot have had.
I think this stuff is bouncing around all over the place, and it is obviously a very volatile environment, political environment. That's probably the understatement of the century.
You mean they hate you all equally?
Well, I think people say, well, how can Labor MPs talk about leadership instability given what you've gone through? But that's exactly the point. I mean, the other mob said that they would be a mature adult government, that there'd be stability, and clearly that's not the case, and there's a whole host of reasons for that. And I'm not going to go through the regular partisan diatribe there.
No, I wasn't asking about them, I was asking about you lot.
No. Well, these things will go up and down. I think the big test for this government is being able to deliver on the things that they took to the election and being able to meet the expectations of the public. Clearly they're not doing it, they're getting caned for it.
Oh, very nice effort there, Ed. You do a good job on moving it around. Look forward to talking to you again on Tech Tuesday and other matters political. Thanks for your time.
Thanks. Good on you.
Ed Husic there. That's it for tonight.